Hi everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Limu. Thank you for clicking on the video. As you can see from the title, this is my testimony, which is basically my story of how I got saved, why I believe that Jesus is real, and why I continue to keep my faith in God. So stay tuned and we'll get right into it. So we can start off at the beginning. I am the youngest of 3 kids. I am the only girl, so I have 2 older brothers. I also have a cousin who is, I call him my brother, but he's younger than me. So it's like 4 of us that, grew up in the same household. And I'm Liberian and Ghanaian, so my family is West African. My mom is from Liberia, my dad is from Ghana. I was born in the States. All of that informed like how I grew up and what types of things I saw in the church, what types of things I experienced at home. So, we grew up going to church. For the most part, it would be my mom and my brothers and myself. There were some times where my dad would come with us too, but a lot of times he would be working on Sundays, so he wouldn't be able to come with us. So, it was a part of life. I remember going to vacation Bible school and going to different church events. I remember they used to have different night events and stuff like that. And I had made friends with people at the church too. Yeah, so I had a lot of friends in church, and I would just end up being in that environment a lot, and that kind of created the perspective that I had around church. But I was baptized for the first time when I was 11. I was baptized the second time, I believe I was 19 or 20 years old. And when I was baptized the first time, basically it was a decision that my mom made. I didn't really have a choice. She told us that we were gonna get baptized, and we got baptized. I remember just repeating what they told me to repeat, and that was it. But growing up, when you grow up in church, it's like a way of life. So I was always a believer. I felt like I was always a Christian. I definitely believed in God. I was skeptical of people that didn't believe in God. I was like, well, why wouldn't you? It was weird to me, if anyone said they didn't believe in God. But as a child, I don't remember having any real experiences with God or, any situations that stood out to me that were, that pivotal, that confirmed my belief. I was kind of just, I was a believer by word, but not by action. I remember praying when I was scared and praying over my food because, that's what we learned growing up. But that was basically it. I didn't really read the Bible. I remember having very new Bibles, and they looked very new after years and years. I knew Psalms 23 because my mom had recited it to us and we had to memorize it. My mom would also be saying different things over us, we're the head and not the tail, above and not beneath. So I knew of the word, and I understood, the purpose of it. But did I do it? No. I thought that because I was a child, I didn't really need to, and I didn't need to in my life because I wasn't going through anything. So fast forward, after I got baptized and things, we ended up going to a new church. That's where I made, friends at, and was going to vacation Bible school, and I was closely knit with that community there. And I will say that at the time I loved everything about the church because I had friends there, and it was going to church was no longer boring because I had my friends there. Through all the churches that I went to, I remember just having, I just didn't necessarily believe in what preachers were saying. I didn't really see preachers walking out their faith, and the pastors that I saw and was under, I didn't think that they too had set a good example for the congregation, in all honesty. And I will say those things affected how I believed. It grew. I was very skeptical of a lot of things, people, quote unquote, catching the Holy Ghost. I was skeptical of that. I was skeptical of people speaking in tongues. I was skeptical of people talking about feeling the Holy Ghost and Holy Ghost fire. I was skeptical about how, how some preachers, when they're preaching and then it like, I guess when they're getting good into the message, it is like, and Lord said, like, I was skeptical of that. Like, I would be sitting there like, this is like all a show. And, but I pushed through life. At the end of the day, I kept pushing through. Like, I was skeptical, but what am I going to do about it? There was nothing that I felt at that time that I could do about it. So we continued, through life. And growing up, I would say the biggest example to me of someone that had faith was absolutely my mom. And I was very close with her growing up because, me and her were the only two girls in the house. So I would go out with her. I would go, I remember there was events and stuff that I would go to her with. I remember, both of us love shopping. So that's where I got it from. We would be shopping a lot. We would be in the malls and stuff, getting our nails done and all types of stuff. Like, me and my mom were very, very close growing up. And so I got to see a lot of the things that she did behind the scenes. Like, she was just a very giving person, just gave from the abundance that she had, even if it didn't seem like she had abundance, because, we of course experienced things growing up, but I will say that my dad was able to provide a certain amount of income for the household. Now, where the money was going, I don't know, but at the end of the day, we were blessed by not having to experience some of the things that other people experience, and like just, lack and not having, enough. So there were definitely things that we needed, but overall, I would say that we had abundance, and my mom would share from that abundance. She was sending money home back to Liberia, and, just helping to bring family members to America. She worked with people that had disabilities, and she also had a hair salon as well. So there would be many times where she would allow the people with disabilities to come, and she would give them like services like free. And she was just very much like a giving person. It was like, she had it, she would give it to you. But as I continue to get older, it's like our relationship changed. I don't know what exactly it was, but I probably recognized it when I was about 13 or so. We moved from the city that we were living in to the county. So we moved maybe about 45 minutes away, and the people that we were hanging around, we didn't hang out with them anymore. We didn't go to the same church. It was too far to get to. So it was like we had to just restart our whole life, is what it seemed like. And I remember, of course, when you're 13, you're already going through your own issues. So I was not at that point looking at it like, what's wrong? I was trying to figure out what was going on with me, I was trying to figure out my body and all these different things, and going to high school and everything else. So, but looking back, there was definitely something that was going on with my mom, and that continued. It continued, and I would say like around 16, my mom took me and my little brother to a church that was in this lady's basement, and it was basically like 15 people, probably 10 people in the basement. And the lady, the pastor, the main purpose of the church, I came to understand, was just like speaking in tongues. So that's all she would do the whole time. And we went a couple times, and around like, I think it was like the third or fourth time that we went, they had an altar call. So my mom had told me like, go up there. And so I went up there, and, she was going one by one, the pastor, she was going one by one and asking everyone, do you want the gift of tongues? And, people were saying yes, and they're like falling out and rolling all around. Like it honestly was like, to be 16 and I was just like, what is going on here? So she came and asked me, and I was like, no. And she asked me, I said no. I remember it being awkward and I was standing up there, and then I went back and sat down. And after that, I don't know if I overheard a conversation or if my mom told me, but she talked to the pastor afterwards, and the pastor had told my mom that I had a demon in me and that she needed to beat it out of me. And, you know, I'm not advocating for nobody to fight their mom, but I didn't grow up getting whoopings. So I don't think at 16, that's the time to start fighting your child, because I fought back. And that was probably one of 2 times where I physically fought my mom. And like, I immediately knew something's going on here. Like, why would you believe this lady that I have a demon when you see me? Like, speaking for myself, I was a good child. It floored me. And I remember telling my brothers like what happened. And the next Sunday came up, you know, my mom woke us up to get ready to go to church. And, you know, I had to get up and go because she had made it clear that like, if we didn't go to church, we had to get out of the house. So I got up and went, and I believe, my brother, the younger brother, I believe he was like, let's just go. It's not going to be that long. Let's just go. So I was like, okay. But I had already told my older brother that if she has us go back to this church, you need to come and get us. So she had us go back to the church, and I think I had texted him, or I don't know if I texted him or called him or whatever, but we went to the church, we were in the service, and my brother comes like barging in like, let's go. He's pointing at me and my little brother, let's go, let's get up, let's go. And we left. We never went back to that church again. But what is crazy about it is that the pastor, I don't know how these things just come full circle. So the pastor, I believe my brother was friends with her daughter. Like, they went to the same school or something like that. And the daughter, I don't know if she messaged my brother or something, but she told my brother that the pastor had been abusing her, like beating her, and that the girl had said like she ran away, and like she had this whole story of, you know, basically hating her mom. And this was the person that my mom was getting advice from and following that advice. So like, I looked at her completely different at that point, but I also recognized that something was going on with her. So to take it back, so my parents came here to America for vacation, and basically a civil war broke out in Liberia, so they couldn't go back home. And my brothers were still, they were still back there. My parents had gotten pregnant with me, and basically, you know, working to get my brothers here to America. So eventually they came here, but you know, in like the first few years of my life, my mom had some sort of mental breakdown. And I had always known that my mom was on medication, but it was told to me that she had depression and that she was on medication for depression. So, you know, growing up, I always had an awareness of that. Like, I remember going to her appointments with her. I remember wanting to be a psychiatrist because I was like, these people really help you. Like, they are, you know, they're really helpful people. Like, they're doctors, they're smart, and then they get to talk to you about your problems. Like, that's what I wanted to be growing up. But I knew that something was going on, and the conclusion I came to was like, she's not on her medication. But so, you know, if somebody is on medicine and they take themselves off, they're not going to tell you that they're not on medication, nor do they want you asking if they're on medication. So yeah, that became a thing in my family because she had been weaning herself off of medication. That was what the change was. her at one point vibrant personality, very sociable, very hardworking, you know, cooking and cleaning and all those things, like everything stopped at one point. And, you know, to the point where I then had to step in and do stuff for the household. So I was learning how to cook and I was already cleaning, but it was things that I wasn't necessarily used to doing that now I had to do because she wasn't doing them. And so we progressed like that. I, in my mind, thought that she just did not want to be with my dad. And I think I felt like when I went off to college that they would just get a divorce. And I was kind of like asking for that, like, well, you know, why be in this relationship if you're not happy? But now looking back, obviously it was much more than that. So I went off to college. My relationship with God stayed the same. I had a Bible right by my bedside. I didn't really open it, but I did pray more. You know, I was saying little prayers because at that point I'm away from home. You know, all of it was so new because, you know, I was like sheltered in my household. My brothers weren't necessarily sheltered, but I was very much sheltered, not only by my parents, but by my brothers too. So going off to college, I just remember my brother telling me, like, you know, because one of his friends had just graduated. He's like, I know such and such, like, I'm gonna be watching you. I got people watching you on campus, so don't be at the parties, don't be at the football players' dorms. And I was just like, I'm not even gonna be able to do nothing. So like it was a culture shock for me going to college. And then I went to a huge university, which is also a party school. So I felt like I needed to get in to fit in. So like I remember starting to drink at that point. And yeah, I started drinking and I would go to parties. And I wasn't doing anything too crazy because one of the years I had a roommate that was a lesbian and would go to like orgies and stuff like that. And she would always invite me and I would be like, no. But I was like dipping and dabbling because I felt like I needed to do things to fit in. So at this point, things had gotten worse at home with my mom. I don't necessarily remember exactly what happened, but she had lost a considerable amount of weight. And I had started researching like what we can do. And one of the things that I found was basically involuntary, it's a legal action that you can file to commit someone to a mental hospital for a certain amount of time. So I found that and I was like, I think this is the only way for us to help her because she doesn't want to talk to anybody. She's very skeptical of us. She's not trusting of anyone. She, you know, all of her behaviors are now very strange. Like it was, at that point, it was just like, well, I don't know what else to do but to like get police involved. So I remember the first time we called, the police came and she was committed for, I believe it was about a month at that point. So when she got out of the hospital, at that point she's mad at everybody because it's like, well, y'all, how could y'all do this to me? Is how she felt. So she got out of the hospital. And at that point, I had decided to leave college and to move back home because I felt like I needed to be around to help. I didn't trust my brothers and my dad to like just make sure that she was okay. So I moved home thinking that I was helping the family out, but then I was very angry because I was like, I gave up my college dream to basically come home and make sure that everything's going okay and nothing is going okay. So, you know, but I enrolled in another college. I just lived at home and got my work done. But, you know, my mom at that point had continued to deteriorate. It was just a lot of the stuff that she was doing was indication that this is not just depression. Like it's more than that. And I didn't know what to do. And, you know, when we would go through that involuntary route, she would be on medication for a certain time period, but it also takes a lot of time for the medication to even get into your system and to change like your behavior. So it was never really enough time. It wasn't enough time. during those hospitalizations. So I just continued to live life. When I moved back home, now I was near my friends, so I had already started drinking before, so I would be out and drinking and in the clubs and just medicating myself, I guess, and passing time. And at this point, I had gotten baptized too. And it's crazy because I had gotten baptized, but that's when my behavior is like I was trying to do things the right way, but it was like another pull that was taking me in a different direction. So, at this point we continued through. I graduate from college. I start dating somebody. Like I'm in a real relationship now. We're going on vacations, and I'm traveling more. I got my passport. So I felt like I was accomplishing everything that I wanted to accomplish in life. But the biggest thing for me was that my mom, still, what was going on with her, I had moved out of the house at that point because it was too stressful for me to be in the house. Because in that house, it was just a lot of it. It was honestly a lot of stress. Someone questioning everything that you're doing, who you're talking to, where you're going. And I know y'all would probably say, well, your parents did that and they didn't have any mental health diagnosis. But it was a level of stress that was being placed on us as well. It was like that anxiety and fear was now becoming something that the whole household has to deal with because this one person is imagining things, basically. So it wasn't until I had moved out of the house and I had kind of decided, like, there's nothing that I can do because we've called the police. We have been through the situation of in and out the hospital, and if she doesn't want to take her medicine, she's not going to take her medicine. And I moved out of the house, and I remember it was another situation that happened because my mom went missing. And I don't remember how long she was missing. Maybe it was like a few days or something, but she didn't come back to the house, and nobody knew where she was. So we filed a missing persons report, and they did find her. But after that, immediately went to the court, and she was hospitalized at that point for a few months. And when she got out of the hospital, she decided like the same day to pack up and move to New York, because at that point she was literally skeptical of us, thinking that we were doing things against her and that we were trying to harm her as a family. So she picked up and she moved to New York. From her living in New York to now, it's been nothing but God. It's been nothing but God. It has been nothing but God. She was going to find help but didn't know how to get it. And, she went without any plan. So at that point, no one knew where she was. And I remember, I think I was traveling for work at that point. And my brother, the middle brother, he went to New York, and this is the one that took me to church. And, he is the one that introduced me, to his church that he was going to so I could get baptized when I was in my late teens, early 20s. And, so he absolutely has been having faith and has been just truly a man of God since I can remember. And so he went up to New York, and it was only God, because it's like, basically door after door would be open for him. Going up to New York to find somebody that's missing without knowing where they are is a daunting task, but literally God would be pointing him like in different places. So God pointed him to a shelter, and that was the shelter that she was at. And if you know anything about this, like when someone goes to a shelter, the people that work at the shelter are never supposed to say like, this person is here, because imagine if you're in like a domestic violence situation, they're not supposed to tell. But literally in my mom's situation, the way how we have had favor, it has been crazy. So the shelter basically was like, yeah, she's here. So, you know, that's where she wanted to stay. When we talked to her, she would be like, yeah, she's safe here. And, you know, she's going to stay here until she can get her house in New York. And that was basically it. And it took, I think, maybe a couple years, and she was able to get this apartment in like a brand new building. And you know, mind you, you know, the housing situation in New York is crazy. So for her to even get that, you know, was only an act of God. More than anything, she has been protected. You know, during COVID, she didn't catch COVID. She was one of those people that's like, I'm not wearing a mask. So, and she did not catch COVID. You know, God has just put like a shield around her, and I truly believe it's because of how she lived her life and how she continues to live her life, because, you know, she still is a good person at heart and has a great soul. So during all of this time where my mom was, you know, in New York, I went through like many periods of just feeling like empty, just feeling like I didn't have a purpose, like just not feeling, I didn't feel happy in life. And I remember so many different situations that I should have been proud and excited for, but I was not as excited because my mom wasn't there to celebrate with me. Like, I remember when I graduated with my MBA and she wasn't at my graduation, it was like, I'm excited to graduate, but like, how excited can you be when the person that has been rooting for you, or one of the people that's been rooting for you for your entire life, is not there to celebrate it with you? For us, we still went to see her. We still would see glimpses of the old her and the true her. So it just, like, I had a lot of frustration, and I turned to everything that I could to pass that time. Like, I became someone that was very goal oriented. I'm still very goal oriented, but my ambitions were for, well, I'm gonna make enough money so that I can change my mom's life. And if I make a certain amount of money, I can buy whatever house that she wants. I can move her wherever. I can pay doctors to be with her. I can pay a nurse to live with her. Like, this is what I was thinking. So I became very much focused on like how to make more money. I can start businesses. I can do this, like this. I am generally a creative person to begin with, but my mind would be like, I would wake up with all these different business ideas, and I was pulled in so many different directions because there's like 6 businesses that I started and didn't finish. So in that time, I also passed my time with dating, passed my time with drinking, passed my time you know, just being out here, you know, gossiping. I would say that because of my mouth being a little bit smart, I think I got in trouble a lot of times with just gossiping, just talking about people, putting my opinions where nobody asked, telling people about themselves when I didn't really need to say anything, you know, just being angry, popping off on people, being willing to argue and cuss people out. I had a lot of pent up anger. I was too woke for my own self, because that wokeness does not necessarily help you in, you know, life. Like, not to say you shouldn't be aware of what's happening or what have happened to our people, but at the same time, it's like having all of this knowledge, what are you going to do about it if you're not applying it in any specific way? And so I was very woke, and that led me to having I felt like, well, if the white man could do such and such, well, I can cheat my way to get to the top. So I remember, like, now I wasn't a scammer, but I just want to make that clear. I was not a scammer, but I don't know if you remember in COVID, they had all these different like money, they were calling them susus, but that's not a susu. So it was like pyramid schemes where you put like $500 in and you get like 3,000. Like, I was down for that. I also was very controlling, so I got into a relationship, and you know, I felt like I could influence that person a lot and would try to influence his decisions and behaviors. And when he didn't do things the way how I wanted to do them, like I was angry and pissed off. And you know, I just try to, like, even outside of relationships, I try to control a lot of things about my environment in my life. You know, I would be the friend that wanted to drive us to the club, and it was controlled, because then I could be like, well, I'm ready to leave, so let's leave. Like, I always wanted to have my say. I didn't want anyone to just run off and make a decision for me. And that spanned to so many areas of my life. Even with work, I remember getting into arguments and things like that because I was told to do something. I didn't necessarily think that was the best way to do it, but instead of me like just voicing my opinion, and you know, if they take it, they take it. If they don't take it, they don't take it. I would voice my opinion, and if it wasn't accepted, it was an issue. Like, I went through a period where I was hopping from job to job every year. Like, I would get into a new position and think I loved it, and then shortly after I would be like, oh, I gotta leave. You know, I don't like such and such. And I know some of that was related to me being controlling. You know, I can't dictate how things are going to be done. But you know, it was like I fell into sin, really. I still said I was a Christian. I still believed in God. But I was not reading the word. I was not really going to church until COVID happened. And right before COVID, I had started going to church. And but I wasn't walking out my faith. I think I looked just like everyone else. You know, at a certain point I had moved in with my boyfriend. Like, you know, I didn't have, like, my standards just were not kingdom standards. I had standards that I made up in my mind, and I was basing my life off of those standards because I was like, well, you know, I'm not a hoe. I'm not out here sleeping with a whole bunch of people. But at the same time, it's like, well, you're not doing what God told you to do either. So like, who made what you think is right what is actually right? And I just had to deal with that. So the situation with my mom continued. You know, she was still in New York at this point. This is now around 2020, 2021, and we had basically spoken to her doctor during one of the hospitalizations, and they were like, well, you guys need to file for guardianship because my parents are still married. So because she's still married, the expectation is that the spouse would be there making a lot of the decisions. And if there's no spouse and the person doesn't have a power of attorney and things like that, it puts them in a space where now the hospital and the social workers are going to make a decision over her. And most times the decision that they make is not necessarily the best decision. You know, they can advocate for you, but there's no other advocate that, aside from God, but you know, your family is the best advocate on earth for you if they actually love you and care for you. So once we were told that about guardianship, I was like, okay, bet. So I started calling lawyers, started researching lawyers, what the process is. But I called all of the guardianship lawyers that I could find, and all of them told me no. All of them told me that they would not take our case. They told me that they did not think we would win our case. They said that guardianship is very difficult to prove unless the person has Alzheimer's or, you know, dementia, and they're like basically in hospice. You know, New York is not a state that is going to approve that. New York is very much supportive of you as an individual. So they're not willing to give up your rights for anything unless they deem that it's a good reason. So, you know, it was kind of defeating when we heard that, because it was just like, well, what do we do? Like, the doctor told us that we should do this, but now talking to all of these attorneys, they're saying that this is not even something that they would take on. And I remember like trying to convince one of the attorneys, and he was like flat out like, you're not going to win this case. And you know, that hearing that really it crushed my spirit. So like my brother and I were just kind of like, well, I don't know, we can just try to help her the best that we can in the way that we can help her, and go from there. So that's what we did. We tried to help her as best as we could help her, but it kept coming to my mind that we should just try to file for guardianship. And I remember looking up the process and what documentation is required, and it was like this huge binder of information about the process and the legal requirements, and there's so many different steps, and I literally would read through it and then feel like defeated, like, well, I don't think we can do this, because they tell you can file for yourself, but the attorney said that you can't, that you're not going to win without an attorney, and they're not going to take the case. And I remember it was the person I was dating at the time, my ex. He was probably the motivating piece for us to file, because he was like, there's nothing, you're not going to lose anything by filing. Like, just try it and see, instead of like deciding that the answer is you're not going to win the case. So I put on my legal hat and I wrote out the case for us. They tell you everything, like basically what the requirements are for guardianship. And so I provided the evidence to prove that like my mom met all of those different areas of concern in order for us to be her guardian. And we moved forward with it. We filed the documentation and they scheduled a court date for us. And I just continued to pray. At that point, I was definitely praying more. Still wasn't really reading my Bible, but I was praying more. And I just continued to pray because I felt like in my heart, God wants us to do this, because there's nothing negative that would come from this. We have been the people that have been there supporting her. The benefit is that we would have more chance to actually advocate for her. So, fast forward to the court date. The day of her trial was actually on my birthday, and November 30th of 2021. So we had her trial. We went up to New York. We went to her apartment, and everything was very surreal. During the case, they had an appointed attorney for her, and my mom was basically like, she doesn't want the attorney. So, the attorney stayed on the call, but she couldn't really advocate for my mom in the way that she would if my mom had actually retained her as her attorney. My mom had told the judge that she wanted to represent herself and that she didn't need guardianship. And she told the judge that, her kids are here and her kids are always taking care of her. Her kids always come and visit her. She doesn't need a guardian because her kids are there for her. And I was just like, look at God, because my mom she's proving our case for us. And literally the judge had asked some questions, and we kind of had to present the evidence, but the judge had made it clear, like the evidence that we did present already was it was very convincing. So yeah, and I moved forward. At that point, went home. I, for whatever reason, had like a real desire to just get into the word, because I underestimated just like reading the Bible. And at that point, I was like experiencing a lot of like anxiety. I remember, because I think I thought that it's because I had a lot going on. So when I moved in with my ex, I put my house on Airbnb. So I was managing that. And then I also had my full-time job. And then that summer, I had also bought a rental property, which I was renovating. So it was a lot of things that I was just trying to maintain. And I thought that it was simply, me just being stressed out. But I was like, I got to do something different. So I started waking up early. I would wake up like around 5:30. I would go and read and study the word. I would go listen to worship music. I would go and just spend time with God. That was like the first time in my life ever that I've done that. And I started feeling like intense conviction, because I was like, so many places in the Bible they talk about fornication, and I'm like, well, I am all living in this man's house, so like, well, what am I supposed to do at this point? And I start to try to reason with myself, like, well, we're gonna get married, so I don't think it's that bad, and all these different things. I felt convicted, but I didn't know what to do with that conviction. I remember, though, with everything that I was reading, my perspective on drugs had changed. At one point, I was someone someone that was like open. Like if you want to smoke, if you want to take edibles, that's, you know, that's your thing, because I like taking shots. So, well, I liked taking shots, but, you know, I was very much like, you know, do whatever you want to do. But as I started reading, like, it convicted me, just even with drugs, like, you know, and like when we're not sober, the devil is waiting like a roaring lion. And I was like, well, so when you're not sober, you're not vigilant. And it's so many things that, like, I was just like, have I been living a lie? Like, who told me these things that I believe? Because I'm just so open to a lot of things, like even, you know, learning that abortion, you know, is murder of a child. Like, I didn't have that. I was just like, you know, if you want to do that and that's your situation, like, I'm not going to judge anybody over that. So a lot of my views were just very much like, you know, I don't judge. Like, I'm not judging anyone. Love is love. Like, you know, I didn't really have strong convictions at that point about most of the things that were going on. I was just like, well, you live your life and I'm gonna live my life, and I'm gonna live my life the way how I think is right, and you can live your life the way you think is right. I didn't understand that the way how the kingdom of God is that there's one right way, there's one truth, there's not multiple truths. So that it blew my mind, because I was just like, well, I don't know how to even get back after like being this way for so long. And that's when my dreams were sort of activated. So I believe it's because I started reading the word that God like basically shined a light on my dreams. And I remember I've always been a dreamer, but my dreams became very much like they were very vivid. And I remember now having an understanding that some of my dreams are from God. And, you know, in that relationship, when I moved in, it was like everything went downhill. I think that at that point, maybe we were tired of each other. I don't know, but everything went downhill, and we had been getting into arguments, and I had a dream about him that was like, it was scary to me. It was so real that it was like frightening to me. And I remember telling him about it, and we got into another argument, and I was like, God is telling me to get out of this relationship, but I didn't know how to, and I didn't want to, you know, I didn't want to, I didn't know how to, so I stayed, and I was just like, well, I can work on myself, like, maybe it's me, maybe it's my attitude, maybe it's all these different things, like, I will adjust myself so that I am not I don't want to look back and say that I was the problem in this relationship. But even with me adjusting myself, like, we would still be bumping heads. And there was one specific argument that happened that I was like, oh no, I gotta leave. And I left, I moved out. And I moved out and moved to my house. I believe that God had put it on my heart to start reading his word because he was already preparing me. Like, he already knew what was happening, but I think that he wanted to make sure that I healed in the right way instead of healing in the wrong way. So it was very much a time of just like just a radical change in my life. I found like actual Bible teachers that I could learn from on YouTube, and I was just so hungry for the word. Like, I would be watching sermons like all day. I would be watching different sermons, and like, you know, I had a new understanding of the word. I would watch the sermons and, you know, follow up and read the Bible to double check what they said. And I'm like, dang, I didn't know that's in the Bible. So it was like a complete learning. I went just through, it was like a crash course for me because I recognized that I needed to heal. Like, I had been in that relationship for over 4 years, and you know, to end something like that in which you have hope that like this would be the person that you're marrying, it can either crush you or propel you. And I was like, this is not about to crush me. Like, I literally was like, I have been through enough in life that if the situation with my mom did not crush me, I'm not letting the relationship crush me. So I started for the first time fasting as well. And fasting, I would say, fasting and praying is absolutely what changed my journey. It changed my walk. Through fasting and praying, I was able to just I was all in with forgiveness. I need to forgive him. I need to forgive him. I don't want to hold on to any trauma. I don't want to hold on to any pain. I want to break every soul tie. I was just focused on that, forgiveness, and healing from the things that I buried within me that I never actually came to terms with. There's so many times where these little situationships and other relationships end, and we internalize why it ended, and we end up bringing that baggage onto other relationships. So it was situations like that I realized I didn't forgive people. I was holding on to, I was very much a person that I can cut you off, I'll block you, and I'm not, there's no issue with that. I was very much I block it heavy, anybody, anyone, it didn't matter. And I will also tell anyone how I felt about what they were doing. But I had realized that block energy was I was also holding on to resentment towards people. And one of the groups I was holding on to resentment towards was with my mom's friends. I was how are these people, I have aunts and uncles and everyone else, and if someone that helped you so much in life, that encouraged you so much in life, how is it that you hear about them going through something, you don't check on their kids, you don't check on them, you basically check on them in passing if you see their kids. I held on to a lot of resentment towards them. And in that year, last year, I had to really just come to terms with forgiveness, forgiving everyone, people that never apologized to me and that may never apologize to me, forgiving them. And I recognized that God was doing something special in my life, because I no longer had the desire to do the same type of stuff. I had started dating again, but which I probably shouldn't have. I started dating again, and I realized that I just didn't want to do the same things. I remember one of the dates I went on with somebody that I really liked, but we ended up at this a rum bar, and I was just I don't want to be here. So I got a drink, didn't really drink it, but was just paying attention to the people and paying attention to him, and just recognizing that the way how I had been dating in the past did not serve me well, because I wasn't dating for compatibility spiritually. I was dating looking at everything else. Okay, is this person ambitious? How do they look? What kind of car do they have? Do they like to travel? Those were the things that I was looking at. So yeah, and last year also we got word. We went to the court because we didn't hear anything about my mom's guardianship case. So went back to the court, and we got word that we were granted guardianship. And it was such a full circle moment. It was priceless. The court clerk lady, she was basically people usually never get full guardianship the first time. And she was usually you have to continue through the process. They'll give you guardianship over certain things. Maybe you'll take care of the person's, maybe you can go with them to their health appointments, but they don't give you guardianship over everything. And we got guardianship over everything. And I would say that that is the ultimate testimony for me, that no matter what you're going through, God still has his hand over our life. And it's been me being reflective and taking the time to intentionally consider what God has done in my life, that I was able to see this. Because even just looking at the situation with my mom, God has protected her, he has kept her, but he's also been healing her. And she hasn't been hospitalized for the past, I believe, 3 years. And in Jesus' name, she won't be hospitalized again ever. I cannot deny the power of God, because also I recognize that the enemy does things that create shame within you. He does things to create shame within you if you don't understand your power as a child of God. And I went through a lot of periods where I felt ashamed of the situation with my mom. Like I had anger about it. Like I had real anger about it. And it's like I didn't want to talk about it to people. I didn't want anyone to have an opinion about it, because it was like a secret, and it was like, well, if you're not actually going to help her, I'm not going to tell you her secret, because that's her business. But I recognize that this is the biggest part of my testimony, because something like this can absolutely shatter you if God is not with you. And the same way how losing a parent or the death of a parent can shatter you, something like this can shatter you. And I would say that my brothers and I have just been tremendously blessed throughout our life, like exceptionally blessed. And I know that, people have said this before, but I recognize it that God has protected us and covered us and kept us and guided us, through many different situations, through tough situations, through opportunities. And during this entire season of my life, I have held on to scripture in Corinthians where Paul is talking about basically Satan giving him a thorn in his flesh, and it basically was meant to torment him. And he asked God 3 times for him to take it away from him, and God was basically like, my power is made perfect in your weakness. And Paul says that he will boast in his weakness and his tribulations and all of those different things. And that really kept me, because it was like, yeah, this situation is not ideal and it's not moving as quickly as I would want it to move, but I know that God's power is shown through this situation, because it is surreal. It is supernatural. When things like this happen, you cannot say that it's a coincidence. And I will never say it's a coincidence, because what God has been doing is divinely orchestrating every step in our lives. And I will say that now on this journey and this walk that I have been on, my faith is real now. Like I don't think I had real faith. I went through a period in which I would pray for things, but I didn't necessarily believe that they would come to pass. I have a different level of faith now where I'm not fearful regarding what I'm asking God for. I believe that if God told me something that I'm gonna have it, and I'm not wavering anymore. So I have gotten to a point where now, because I've been reading my word, I understand how God loves us and the things that he does in his love. And it's been for me a testimony, because I have had to let go of me being controlling. I have just taken a step back in so many areas of my life where it's like, well, God, whatever you want me to do is what I'm gonna do. I'm not gonna try to force anything. And this has shown itself in people that I was dating, and I got different dreams about it and would fast and pray about it and got a clear answer that no, you are not supposed to be with this person. And job opportunities, and they looked amazing on paper, and prayed and fasted about it, and the answer was no, you need to run away from that. So it's been so many situations in which now, because I am giving God the space to take over in my life, he's taking over, and he is actually guiding me through these different seasons that I'm in. And it's so exciting. It is so exciting. It's so rewarding. It is not for the faint of heart. But I know that everything I have experienced is for a reason, and I know that my testimony will help somebody. So I wanted to share my testimony. I felt it on my heart to share my testimony and to create this YouTube channel, which is for God and to God, and it's going to be everything that's faith-based. Simply because I went through so many years. I'm 32 now. I went through so many years of not believing and not having faith. And those things lead to so much shame and so much doubt, so much fear, and just us doing things randomly with no purpose behind it. And I would say throughout everything that I have experienced and achieved in life, it doesn't feel good when you're doing these things for your own benefit and not for the glory of God. And where you're doing things that you don't necessarily believe God told you to do it, but you're doing it because it was on your bucket list. I have been there. I have experienced those things. I have achieved those things. And I know that at the end of the day, it feels like you're just checking something off a to-do list. It doesn't actually feel like accomplishment. So I wanted to encourage you all. And my faith is growing every day, but my faith is tremendous now because I've had so many encounters with God, and that have changed how I look at things. Just having a close, intimate relationship with God can change your perspective on so much. There was so much, like, even now I'm in a season where I'm not drinking, and I did not think I would ever get to that point because I was the person that was like, let's all get shots, like every time, like. But now I have no desire. I have no desire to drink, and I believe that it's a reason behind it. It's just the life that I live now is a complete 180 from the life that I was living before. And, I just encourage you to get into actual prayer, to take everything to God, to start reading the Bible, even if you just start with a paragraph. Like, actually start reading the Bible, start studying the Bible. The things that you have questions about, go to Google and say, what does the Bible say about fear? And that gives you such an understanding of just the deception that we are all susceptible to just being in this society. We've been deceived on so many things. And it wasn't until I started reading the word that I understood that, like, oh, I thought such and such, and that's not actually the truth. Restart your relationship with him. If you feel like you have fallen off, like, just pray to him. If you're already saved, whether you're saved or not, pray to him and ask him to come into your life. If you seek him, he will meet you where you are, but you have to actually seek him, though. You have to seek him. He will reveal things to you, and he will show you what it is that he wants you to do. I would say now I've been in a season of, like, my dreams have just come, like, even more they've come alive. And God shows me a lot of things in my dreams, and I finally have more of an understanding of what I should be doing with my life. And, I have an understanding of what I shouldn't be doing with my life. I have an understanding about situations that may happen in the future. And, once you seek God, he gives you all of these different gifts that give you a supernatural advantage in this world. And it is priceless. It's priceless. It's priceless. But I don't want to drag this video on too long. But thank you guys for staying until the end. I love you all, wherever you are in this world. Thank you for watching, and subscribe to my channel because I'm gonna have videos coming out. Just stay in prayer, stay blessed, and stay focused. Talk to you soon. Bye.